Okay, hi class. I'm going to be lecturing on chapter 4 with one word and one strength, the Shandu, and Shandu, excuse me. This is an interesting chapter for me. I like talking about this chapter because so far in class we've talked about the ways that love is configured or exists as an emotion in other cultures a little bit differently than it does in the US, but we've been primarily studying other Western cultures, places like Russia, like Lithuania, and things of that nature. So this is our first look into a culture that talks about love in a very different way, that does not have the same cultural categories as love as we do, and it's configured in a very different way. And according to your author, this particular chapter helps expose Western bias that is implicit and explicit in the study of romantic love. So before this group was studied, we had been previously talking about how everybody's culture either emphasizes romantic love, companionate love, or romantic sexual love. And it seems, as we've been learning, that those are certain kinds of pre-programmed tracks that are in human brains to have these three kinds of love. But the power of culture is such that it can actually override some of these biological natures that we seem to have. And in this, at the end of this chapter, I'm going to get to try to get at the point, which is, do the do they have a love that focuses more and emphasizes romantic love, passionate love, or is it companionate love? And we'll get to that. So earlier studies assumed or implied that romance was exclusive to European culture. In particular, if you read about the history of this field of study prior to 1992, even anthropologists thought, well, other cultures primarily have these other kinds of love, such as sex, sexual love, or companionate love, and it's only us Western white Europeans who are so enlightened and so well versed in certain kind of romantic poetry and film and media and things of that nature, that we have this history of what we have come to call romantic love, and other cultures just haven't evolved that far. And so it was pretty explicitly and implicitly very biased because, especially at that time period, most anthropologists were white, and they tended to put themselves on this pyramid, as we've seen in chapter 2. So this was largely disproved by Jim Kowiak, who is the author of your book, and also Helen Fisher, who we've heard from earlier in her TED Talk. In 1992, they did this big survey of hundreds of cultures around the world, and they found that something like 92% of them all had evidence of passionate romantic love. And this is true of this group of people. So there's two major types of romance, just like we in this group of people among the Lahu. There are, just like we have in the United States, we have, this sort of romantic love and a companionate love. But be that as it may, they have two ways to access this. There is extramarital, chaste, and courtly. This is the preferred mode of falling in love, getting married in Lahu culture. It correlated with societies that are close, competitive, individualistic, highly structured, male-dominated, and that practice arranged marriage. Now, there are other kinds of romance too. This is within romantic love. There is the second kind, intrinsically linked to sexuality and marriage. So this is a different type of romance. This is associated with societies marked by openness, by competition, by individualism, by fluidity, relative gender equality, and the practice of marriage choice. So you can see that the U.S. is probably much more on the side of the second type of romance. We are more of a open, competitive, individualistic, marriage choice type culture, whereas the Lahu are on this other kind, this extramarital, chaste, and courtly. But that just because they have arranged marriage and they're a highly structured society that's male dominated. I would argue that the US is also male dominated. Just because they are that way doesn't mean that they don't have romance, as previous researchers used to think. So on page 97 it says, romance does not exist in non-individualistic societies except for a few whose unique institutions simultaneously encourage premarital sexual freedom and exercise strict controls of marriage, which are expected to stay cool. And it seems that the Lahu qualify as one of these groups. So here's some images of the Lahu, what they look like. This study reveals that romantic love can flourish in a society characterized by cooperation, by group orientation, and prohibitions against premarital sex. Features that are diametrically opposed to those in, this older Lindholm model, which is covered here and came out in 1998, talking about romantic love. So this is a brief summary that I'm just going to go over a summary of the article. It's on page 98, as I have listed here, if you want to go back through it. Monogamous marriage is the exclusive locus of intimacy for this group, for the Lahu, manifested by the harmonious husband and wife team. Idolization of Lahu intimacy is expressed in courtship and love suicide, which we're going to get to, and extreme social discouragement of public displays of sexual desire and ambiguity towards eroticism. So that means that there's not a lot of PDA, that there's not a lot of public displays of erotic desire for your partner, which is probably pretty different than in the United States. So this study contributes to the diverse manifestations of intimacy across societies by demonstrating a special cultural ideal in which intense romantic love is encapsulated within the idolization of marriage, which repels any public expression of sexual desire.